In unyielding shackles, the desperate efforts of women in ancient Chinese military camps to prevent pregnancy. Life under the ancient Chinese military, particularly for the women forced into providing sexual services for soldiers, was a relentless succession of harsh days where control over one's body and future seemed a distant, even fantastical notion. Pushed into a situation where they had to acquiesce to countless individuals without the right to refuse, the risk of unwanted pregnancy loomed like a death sentence in a context where medical knowledge was primitive and understanding of reproduction pitifully limited. These women could only cling to crude, ineffective contraceptive methods, sometimes trading their very health, even their lives, in the process. The story of their struggle to prevent pregnancy is not merely a simple medical aspect of that era, but a clear testament to their desperation, lack of protection, and the utter depths of their oppressed status. One of the methods these women might have attempted, based on folk knowledge or the scant information available to them, was consuming various herbs or mixtures believed to have contraceptive effects. In traditional medicine, certain plants were thought to influence the menstrual cycle or induce early miscarriage. This knowledge was often passed down orally through generations of women or within specific communities. For women in the military camps, they might have sought ways to discreetly inquire or exchange information with others in similar circumstances, or with women doing other work in the camp, hoping to find some remedy that could help them escape the risk of pregnancy. The herbs used were diverse, depending on the region and local knowledge. However, the biggest problem lay in the fact that the actual effectiveness of these herbs was often not scientifically verified. Dosage was also based solely on personal experience or guesswork, leading to them being completely ineffective in preventing conception. More dangerously, some folk contraceptive remedies included extremely toxic ingredients. History records in some ancient cultures, including China, the use of mixtures containing lead or mercury for the purpose of contraception or abortion. These heavy metals are incredibly harmful to the human body, causing severe damage to the nervous system, kidneys, and potentially leading to permanent infertility, even death. The fact that women in military camps had to risk using such toxic methods demonstrates the extent of their desperation in controlling their fertility under oppressive conditions. They had no safe options, received no medical advice, and could only gamble with their lives in the hope of avoiding the burden of pregnancy and childbirth in a harsh environment like the military camp. Another crude contraceptive method that women might have used was inserting materials into the vagina to create a barrier preventing sperm from reaching the uterus. This is one of the oldest physical contraceptive methods recorded in history across many different cultures. The materials used varied widely depending on availability, including linen cloth, cotton, natural sponges, or even other natural materials rolled or folded. The usual method involved dipping this material into some liquid, sometimes water, oil, or other mixtures believed to have antiseptic or spermicidal properties, though their actual effectiveness was very low, and then placing it deep inside the vagina before sexual intercourse. The idea behind this method was that the material would block the path of sperm, or the soaked liquid would reduce their motility. However, the effectiveness of this method was extremely limited. The materials often did not fit snugly, could easily shift during intercourse, and their ability to block sperm was very low. Furthermore, using non-sterilized materials inserted into the moist environment of the vagina created a very high risk of infection. For women in military camps, the lack of sanitation exacerbated this risk. Reusing these materials without proper cleaning was likely unavoidable due to limited resources, further increasing the risk of infection. While it might have offered a sliver of hope, this method did not provide significant protection against unwanted pregnancy and also posed many gynecological health risks to the woman. Amidst the vortex of danger, the silent battle against transmitted diseases by ancient military women in the harsh environment of ancient Chinese military camps, the lives of women forced to serve the soldiers' physiological needs were fraught with immeasurable risks, not only physically and psychologically, but also from the insidious threat of health issues transmitted through close contact. Placed in a situation where they had to serve a large number of individuals without the ability to refuse, they were particularly vulnerable to pathogens. However, in a context where medical knowledge was rudimentary and understanding of disease transmission very limited, the preventative measures they could employ offered almost no significant protection, turning their lives into a silent and precarious battle against the ever-present threat of illness. The harsh reality is that in a situation where they were compelled to provide sexual services, the most effective measure to prevent the transmission of health issues, abstinence, was absolutely not an option for these women. They had no right to decide whether or not to engage in sexual relations, nor with whom or how often. Their lives were entirely under the control of others and the demands of the soldiers. Being put in a position where they had to perform sexual acts reluctantly, sometimes in violent circumstances, rendered their ability to protect themselves effectively non-existent. The simplest and most effective measure to avoid infection was completely stripped from their reach, pushing them into a dangerous vortex with no escape. This lack of fundamental choice was the root cause of their extreme vulnerability to transmitted pathogens in the collective and deprived living conditions of the military camps. Personal hygiene could only be maintained at a very basic level, if at all, while an awareness of keeping the body clean might have existed to some extent. The surrounding environment, the lack of clean water, soap, and basic sanitary facilities made maintaining adequate hygiene incredibly difficult. For women who had to come into contact with many different individuals, inadequate personal hygiene further increased the risk of infection and the outbreak of health problems, not only those transmitted sexually, but also other infectious diseases. The absence of a clean living and working environment coupled with limited personal hygiene practices, created an ideal breeding ground for pathogens to thrive and spread rapidly within their small and confined community. No matter how hard they tried, efforts at personal hygiene in such a deprived situation were like a drop in the ocean against the ever present threat of illness. When unusual symptoms appeared on the body, especially in the intimate areas, these women might turn to topical applications or poultices made from herbs based on folk knowledge or advice from others. Traditional Chinese medicine did utilize various herbs to treat skin ailments, wounds, or inflammatory symptoms. In cases of sores, blisters, or discomfort in the genital area, they might try applying topical remedies made from plants believed to have antiseptic or soothing properties. However, the effectiveness of these methods against sexually transmitted health issues was very limited. Most herbs could only alleviate external symptoms or support the healing process of common wounds, but they could not eradicate the pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi that had entered the body. Treatment focused solely on external symptoms meant the illness could continue to develop internally and spread to others unknowingly. Furthermore, self-treating with herbs without an accurate diagnosis could worsen the condition or cause unwanted side effects. Beyond external applications, some individuals might also have believed in the ability of consuming certain herbs thought to have detoxifying effects to prevent or purify the body of pathogens. The concept of detoxification in traditional medicine often related to eliminating harmful elements or balancing yin and yang within the body, with the belief that health issues transmitted through close contact were due to the invasion of evil qi or factors causing imbalance. Drinking certain herbs with cooling, fever-reducing, or supposedly detoxifying properties might have been seen as a way to purify the body after exposure. However, like other herbal remedies, the effectiveness of drinking herbs to prevent sexually transmitted diseases was extremely limited, if not entirely ineffective. These herbs might have had some effects in supporting liver or kidney function or improving overall health to a certain extent, but they did not contain active compounds capable of directly killing the agents causing STIs, such as the bacterium Treponema pallidum, which causes syphilis, Neisseria gonorrhoeae, which causes gonorrhea, or the various viruses and fungi known today. Blindly trusting in the detoxifying ability of herbs could lead the infected person to be complacent, ignore initial symptoms, and not seek medical help, even though medical care at that time was very limited, allowing the illness to worsen and spread further. For women in military camps, continuous and varied exposure to many different individuals meant the risk of infection was very high, and detoxifying methods based solely on herbs could not possibly provide sufficient protection against the potential onslaught of pathogens. Finally, a sad reality is that during the ancient Chinese period, there were almost no specific preventative measures known and widely applied to prevent the transmission of sexually transmitted diseases as we have today. The lack of understanding about the precise mechanisms of pathogen transmission was the biggest barrier. People at that time did not clearly understand that these diseases were primarily transmitted through the exchange of bodily fluids during sexual intercourse. Instead, they might attribute the cause to various factors, such as toxic qi, imbalances in the body, or even divine punishment. The concept of using a physical barrier during intercourse to prevent direct contact between bodily fluids was very unfamiliar. Although there are some records of the use of rudimentary sheaths or coverings made from animal intestines or linen in some ancient cultures, and perhaps nascent appearances in China during later periods or in very specific contexts, they were not widespread, not standardized, very ineffective, and not considered reliable methods of disease prevention, especially in the military camp environment with a large number of soldiers and high frequency of contact. Consistently providing and using such materials was almost impossible, precisely because of the severe lack of specific and effective preventative measures. Women in the military camps faced an alarming risk of contracting sexually transmitted diseases. Each encounter was a gamble with their health and lives. They had no tools to protect themselves from the invasion of pathogens and could only resign themselves to fate. This helplessness further highlighted the brutality of the circumstances in which they had to live. The lack of effective preventative measures, combined with harsh living conditions, poor sanitation, and having to serve the needs of many different individuals, resulted in a very high incidence of sexually transmitted health issues among this group of women. Historical records, while not directly stating specific rates, can partly reflect this reality through descriptions of disease symptoms, such as sores and reproductive problems. These illnesses not only caused physical pain, but also seriously affected reproductive health, leading to infertility, pregnancy complications, if pregnancy was possible, and in many cases, resulting in debilitation and death. Furthermore, social stigma towards those who contracted these illnesses worsened the situation. Instead of receiving sympathy and medical care, they might be ostracized, blamed, and abandoned. The lack of understanding about disease was not limited to prevention, but also extended to treatment. Treatment methods at that time were often ineffective based on trial and error and could cause many dangerous side effects. This meant that even if they contracted an illness, their chance of complete recovery was very slim. The lives of women in ancient Chinese military camps were a tragedy of oppression and a severe lack of comprehensive protection. They were stripped of control over their bodies, forced into a high-risk environment, and faced the threat of transmitted diseases without any effective preventative measures at their disposal. Their attempts at self-protection, if they existed, were merely weak efforts within a cruel system and an era where medical knowledge was too limited. During the war-torn era of ancient China, as various forces vied for power and territory, brutal battles not only ravaged homes and farmlands, but also pushed countless lives into the abyss of despair. Amidst that chaos, the fate of women became as fragile as grass in a storm. When a stronghold fell, invading soldiers poured in like ravenous wolves. Screams echoed, terrified eyes darted about, and trembling silhouettes shivered in the darkness. Scenes that had become all too familiar. Women, the weaker ones, unarmed and powerless to resist, became the primary targets of oppression and lust. The luckier ones were captured as slaves, traded like commodities, or forced to serve the military. The less fortunate, their fates were sealed in the dead of night. No cries for help, no one to save them. Under the rule of military conquest, women were regarded as spoils of war, rewards for the conquerors. No one cared about their sobbing pleas or their eyes filled with despair. In the occupied cities, all people saw were the arrogant smiles of the victors and the silent submission of the defeated. Yet, amidst the darkness of cruelty, small flames of hope still flickered. Women who refused to surrender, who would not accept their fates as predetermined. They fought back, they resisted, and they rose up to find ways to save themselves. The secret behind the city gate, the sky was a fiery red with the sunset, casting a blood-red glow over the fluttering battle flags. Plumes of black smoke rose from burnt-out houses, and screams echoed throughout the city. Hakin, once the most prosperous city in Yangbak, had fallen to the brutal hands of the enemy. Amidst the chaos, Lak Yen, a slender girl with sharp eyes, hid in a hidden corner of the city wall. Her long black hair was pulled up in a high bun, secured by an exquisite jade hairpin. Her bright, sparkling eyes conveyed intelligence and quick wit. She didn't cry, didn't tremble, only clutched a small knife tightly in her hand, her gaze fixed forward with determination. When heavy footsteps echoed, Lakyan pressed herself against the cold stone wall. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes remained steadfast. A foreign soldier, tall and burly, a long saber slung over his shoulder, sauntered past. His eyes swept around, pausing where she was concealed. Haha, looks like there's a beauty hiding here. His voice was deep and guttural, full of primal desire, his eyes gleaming with lust. Lak Yen knew she couldn't hide forever. Biting her lip, she lunged forward with the small knife. The sharp blade glinted in the twilight, but her speed was no match for the muscular soldier. He easily grabbed her wrist, twisting it hard, causing the knife to clatter to the ground with a dry sound. "Don't waste your strength," he sneered, gripping her hand and pulling her closer, his dark intentions clear in his eyes. Lak Yen stumbled to the ground, her long hair coming undone, the jade hairpin subtly shaking. She looked at him, her eyes devoid of pleading, only a strange calmness. The soldier seemed provoked. He bent down, his rough hand tearing at her outer garment. At that moment, when he was off guard, Lak Yen subtly pulled the jade hairpin from her hair. With a quick, discreet motion, her eyes glinted with a cold sharpness. Waiting for the exact moment, he lowered his head close to her. She unexpectedly raised her hand and plunged the hairpin forcefully into his side. Ah! A scream ripped through the air. The soldier staggered back, clutching his wound. Although not deep, the piercing pain made him stare at her with wide eyes, fury boiling in his veins. "You little whore," he roared, lunging towards her. Lak Yen only managed to take a step back. Before she could react, his rough hand slapped hard across her face. A burning pain spread across her cheek, but she still held the jade hairpin tightly in her hand, her eyes completely fearless. The soldier furiously attacked her a few more times, but his movements gradually slowed, his breathing heavier. He stopped, looked at his hand, his eyes showing confusion. What did you do to me?" Lak Yen smiled, even though her lips were bleeding. She calmly replied, "You'll know soon enough." The soldier began to sway, his eyes wide with terror. He let out a final roar before collapsing to the ground, his breathing fading. His hands clenched where she had stabbed him. Lak Yen stood up, adjusted her hair, and put the jade hairpin back in place, her gaze cold as she swept it over the motionless soldier. She didn't look back, simply walked away calmly, her steps quickening towards the path ahead, where darkness awaited. Under the crescent moon, Lak Yen slipped through the narrow alleys, her steps light and silent. The smell of burnt wood and the metallic tang of blood still hung in the air, but she was all too familiar with this cruelty. Ha Kin, the city where she grew up, was now just ruins, submerged under the control of the invading army. Her steps paused before a dilapidated house, its two wooden doors askew, the marks of forced entry still fresh. She looked around, confirming she wasn't being followed, then gently pushed the door open and slipped inside. Inside, a middle-aged man was waiting. The flickering candlelight illuminated his gaunt face, but his eyes still burned with resolve. Seeing Lak Yen enter, he quickly stood up. "Are you safe?" His voice was hoarse. Lak Yen nodded, placing the jade hairpin on the table. "I took down one, but I can't stay long. They'll find out soon." The man looked at her, his eyes a mix of pride and worry. "Well done, but I'm worried about you. The enemy is tightening their grip, searching every house. It won't be easy to escape them forever." Lak Yen was silent, her sharp eyes looking into the distance. She knew he was right, but she had no choice. Hiding and assassinating were the only plans for survival, and protecting those who remained. "I can't stop. If we don't resist, this city will be trampled forever." Her voice was firm. The man looked at her for a long time, then sighed. "If that's the case, I will take you to meet someone." Chapter 2. Conspiracy in the Darkness. As dawn broke, Lak Yen followed the man through winding alleys, squeezing past piles of rubble. Finally, they stopped before an old tea house, its sign weathered and rotten with age. "Here?" she asked, frowning. The man nodded, signaling for silence, then lightly knocked 3 times on the wooden door. A click echoed. The door opened, and a tall, thin man with sharp eyes appeared. His gaze swept over Lak Yen. Then he smirked. "Finally brought her." Lak Yen felt a little uneasy, But she quickly regained her composure, meeting his gaze without a hint of fear. "Who are you?" He didn't answer, only motioned for her to sit at a small wooden table in the corner of the room. On the table, a pot of tea released a faint aroma, light wisps of steam rising. The man sat down opposite her, pouring tea into a cup with slow movements. "I am Truong Ki, the head of the Dark Guard Society of Hakin City." Lok Yen's eyes widened in surprise. The Dark Guard Society had long been a legend, an underground organization protecting the city from foreign powers. But no one had ever seen the face of its leader. She looked at Truong Ki, suspicion clearly on her face. Truong Kai just smiled faintly. "Believe it or not, if you still want to survive and help the people in the city, then you must cooperate with me." Lok Yen frowned. "How do we cooperate?" Truong Ki put down the teacup, his sharp eyes glinting with calculation. "We will carry out small raids on the occupying army. You will be the bait, and I will take care of the rest." "Bait?" Lok Yen narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Yes, with your appearance and intelligence, luring them into a trap won't be difficult. You can resist just enough for them to lower their guard, then strike the finishing blow." Truong Kai replied calmly. Lok Yen was silent, thinking. This plan was dangerous, but it was also the best opportunity to fight the enemy. If successful, not only she but many others would have a chance to survive. She looked up, her eyes determined. "I agree." Truong Kai smiled in satisfaction. "Good. We will start tonight." Chapter 3. The Trap in the Night. Night fell, and darkness swallowed the narrow alleys. Lak Yen put on dark clothing, her hair neatly pinned up, the jade hairpin in place again, this time steeped in a new kind of poison, shadowless poison. She walked silently, deliberately leaving traces, occasionally looking around as if searching for an escape route. Not long after, heavy footsteps echoed behind her, flickering torchlight illuminating a corner of the wall. "There, that girl," a soldier shouted. Lak Yen turned around, her eyes wide with panic like a lost deer, then immediately turned and ran quickly. The sound of the soldier's hurried footsteps followed, mocking laughter echoing behind her. When she reached a dead end, Lak Yen stopped, her breath coming in short gasps, her hand gripping the small knife. The soldiers rushed forward, blocking her escape. The leader smirked. "No more running. Just come with us obediently, and maybe you'll keep your life." Lak Yen smiled faintly, her voice soft but firm. "Keep my life? You should worry about your own lives first." The sentence made them all freeze, looking at each other in confusion. At that moment, Lak Yen unexpectedly threw the knife towards the leader. The blade cut through the air. He quickly parried it, but before he could react, shadows leaped down from the surrounding rooftops, glinting blades slicing through the air. Lak Yen calmly stepped back, a cold smile on her face. Truong Kai and the members of the Dark Guard Society had appeared, their eyes sharp, their movements precise. One by one, the soldiers fell silently. Chapter 4. A Promise Beneath the Moonlight. When the last soldiers fell, Truong Ki approached Lok Yen, the sharpness in his eyes softening slightly. Not bad. You did very well. Truong Kai nodded subtly. Lok Yen smiled, her eyes sparkling under the moonlight. This is just the beginning. I want more than this. Not just a few scattered soldiers, but the entire occupying army. Truong Kai looked at her intently, his gaze complex. I've met many with strong wills, but none as daring as you. A woman ready to stab the enemy without the slightest fear. What about being a woman? The blood spilled on this ground doesn't distinguish between men and women. If we don't stand up, we will forever be slaves under their heels. Her voice was resolute, her eyes burning with the fire of hatred. Truong Ki was silent for a long time, then nodded slightly. Then from now on, you will be an official member of the Dark Guard Society. Lok Yen didn't reply. She just looked into the distance, where the glow of fires still flickered from the looted houses. Deep within her eyes, another fire was smoldering, growing larger each day. Chapter 5. The Dangerous Bait. From that night on, Lok Yen began to carry out more audacious raid plans with the Dark Guard Society. With her beautiful, quick-witted appearance and sharp reflexes, she was often assigned the role of bait to lure the enemy into traps. Lok Yen walked out onto the street, wearing a thin black cloak, her face concealed by a thin silk scarf, revealing only her sharp eyes. With each step she took, the eyes of the invading soldiers were drawn to her, like hunting wolves spotting weak prey. When a group of soldiers spotted her walking alone, they immediately followed, their eyes undisguised in their bloodthirstiness. Lok Yen feigned panic, slowly backing into a narrow alley, then suddenly turned and ran quickly. "Get her!" a soldier yelled. They chased after her, their hurried footsteps echoing. But Lok Yen ran very fast, her black cloak a blur around the winding corners. When she reached a dead end, she stopped, her breath coming in gasps, pretending to be cornered. "This girl is fast," a soldier panted, gripping his saber tightly. Lok Yen turned around, her eyes full of fear, but a slight smile flickered at the corner of her lips. The soldiers didn't notice. They only saw a weak girl cowering in the corner, and they laughed heartily as they advanced. The leader stepped forward, raising his hand to grab her. But just as his hand touched the hem of her cloak, Lok Yen unexpectedly spun around. The small knife in her hand flashed in the dim light, slicing a long gash across his arm. "You slut!" he roared, blood dripping, his eyes full of rage. But before he could do anything, from behind, shadows swooped down like the wind. Blades flashed sharply, screams echoed, and then everything fell silent again. Truong Kai stepped out, patting Lok Yen's shoulder lightly. "It seems I wasn't wrong to choose you." Lok Yen only responded with a nod, her gaze fixed on the distance, where the flickering fires had not yet died out. Chapter 6. The Enemy's Whisper. News of the missing soldiers spread continuously, and the enemy began to feel uneasy. In the great hall of the barracks, the foreign general, Unveil, stood before rows of soldiers, his eyes icy. "You are useless. To let a bunch of nobodies Kill my soldiers one by one. You deserve to be punished. Under the flickering candlelight, the soldiers stood in silent bowed heads, no one daring to speak. Ha Tongvei waved his hand, and the soldier immediately collapsed. Blood spread on the cold ground, a short scream echoing before fading away. If you don't want to die like him, find out who is behind this for me. A shadow standing beside Ha Tongvei slightly curled his lip, whispering, "General, according to the information we've gathered, the leader of this rebel group is a woman. She is very beautiful and cunning, the bait in the raids." "A woman?" Ha Tongvei laughed, his laughter cold and full of contempt. "A woman can outsmart you? Not an ordinary woman, General. She is Lak Yen, the beloved daughter of General Lak Min Hao, who once defended Ha Kin." The smile on Ha Tongvei's face vanished. He sat down in his chair, pondering for a long time, before waving his hand. "Good. Bring me her head. No, wait." His eyes flashed with calculation. "Bring her to me. I want to see how smart she is." Chapter 7. The trap is set. The Dark Guard Society continued their raids. Unaware that a trap had been set, Ha Tongvei dispatched atom of elite soldiers, disguised as merchants, to infiltrate the small markets and secretly investigate. During one raid, Lak Yen suddenly realized something was wrong. When she threw her knife, the soldier in front of her immediately dodged it, even counterattacking skillfully. She stepped back, but it was too late. Behind her, arrows were already aimed. The escape route completely blocked. A mocking voice called out, "Lak Yen, I finally caught you." Lak Yen looked up. Standing before her was Ha Tongvei, his face smug, his eyes narrowed like a beast that had found its prey.